Commander Hana stood on the bridge of the Celestial Harmony, watching the stars drift past the main viewing screen. She had been doing patrol runs in this sector for almost 10 years now. The same routes, the same empty space, the same boring reports to send back to headquarters. The Vorthak Confederation had controlled this part of the galaxy for 3,000 years, and nothing exciting ever happened out here anymore. The bridge was quiet and peaceful, just the way Hana liked it. Her crew moved around their stations with practiced ease. The soft blue lights of their control panels cast gentle shadows on their faces. Everything was calm and orderly, exactly as it should be on a properly run Vorthak ship. "Commander," called Minho from his sensor station. His voice had a strange tone that made Hana turn around. "I'm getting some odd readings from the asteroid belt." Hana walked over to look at his screen. Minho had been her sensor operator for 5 years, and she had never seen him look confused before. He was staring at his displays with his head tilted to one side, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "What kind of readings?" Hana asked. "I'm not sure," Minho said, touching different controls on his panel. "The computer says there are gravitational distortions out there, but they don't match anything in our database. Look at this." He pointed to a series of wavy lines on his screen. Hana had seen thousands of sensor readings in her career, but these lines looked completely wrong. They were too big, too strong, and they seemed to be moving in patterns that made no sense. "Are you sure your equipment is working right?" Hana asked. "I ran 3 full diagnostics," Minho replied. "Everything checks out fine, but these readings, Commander, I've never seen anything like this. The energy signatures are enormous." Yuna, the fleet engineer, looked up from her station across the bridge. "Maybe it's a natural phenomenon," she said. "Sometimes stellar formations can create unusual gravitational effects. We could be seeing the birth of a new star system." Hana nodded. That sounded reasonable. Space was full of strange things that science couldn't always explain right away. "How far away are these readings?" she asked Minho. "About 6 light hours," he replied, "near the outer edge of the asteroid belt. Any signs of intelligent life?" "That's the weird part," Minho said, frowning at his screen. "I'm not detecting any of the usual signs. No energy dampening fields, no stealth signatures, no quantum communications, but something that big should be showing up on every sensor we have." Hana thought about this. The Vorthak had the most advanced sensor technology in the galaxy. Their ships could detect a small spacecraft from several star systems away. If there was something large enough to create those gravitational readings, they should be able to see it clearly. "Taiho!" she called to her communications officer. "Are you picking up any radio signals from that area?" Taiho shook his head. "Complete silence, Commander. Not even background radiation. It's like there's a dead zone out there." This was getting more interesting. Hana had been hoping for something to break up the routine of patrol duty, but now she was starting to feel a little nervous. In her experience, when space went completely quiet, it usually meant trouble. "Set course for the asteroid belt," she ordered, "but keep us at maximum stealth. I want to know what we're dealing with before we get too close." The Celestial Harmony changed direction smoothly. Hana could feel the slight vibration through the deck as the ship's energy-dampening field adjusted to their new heading. Around them, the rest of the patrol fleet fell into formation. 7 ships total, all equipped with the latest Vorthak technology. As they got closer to the asteroid belt, Minho's readings became even stranger. "Commander," he said, his voice tight with confusion, "the energy levels are getting stronger, much stronger. Whatever is out there, it's using more power than our entire fleet combined." "That's impossible," Yuna said from her station. "Nothing uses that much energy except for planetary defense systems or major industrial facilities." "Well, something is using it," Minho replied. "And it's moving." Hana felt a chill run down her spine. "Moving how?" "Purposefully," Minho said. "Not drifting like asteroids or debris. These readings are moving like ships under power." "How many ships?" Hana asked. Minho worked at his controls for several minutes before answering. "I can't get an exact count. The energy interference is too strong. But, Commander, I think there are at least a dozen contacts, maybe more. A dozen ships that were each more powerful than her entire fleet." Hana had never heard of such a thing. The Vorthak Confederation was the most advanced civilization in known space. Their technology was thousands of years ahead of anyone else they had ever met. But these readings suggested something far beyond even Vorthak capabilities. Could it be a Confederation research project? She asked Yuna. Something classified that we weren't told about? Yuna shook her head. Impossible. I know every major research initiative in the Confederation. Besides, our people would never build ships that crude. Crude? Look at these power signatures, Yuna said, pointing to her screen. Whoever built these things doesn't care about energy, efficiency at all. They're just pouring massive amounts of raw power into everything. It's like using a fusion reactor to light a candle. Hana stared at the readings. The energy patterns were unlike anything she had ever seen. Vorthak technology was elegant and refined, using the minimum amount of power needed to achieve maximum results. These ships seemed to operate on the opposite principle, using overwhelming force for everything. Commander, Tejo called out, I'm still not getting any communications from them. But they're definitely artificial. I can detect some kind of electromagnetic activity, but it's on frequencies we don't normally use. Keep trying, Hana ordered. If there are intelligent beings, on those ships we need to make contact. As they moved closer, Hana found herself staring at the main viewing screen, waiting for their first visual contact with whatever was out there. Her crew was quiet and tense. Everyone could feel that they were approaching something unprecedented. Visual. Contact in 30 seconds, reported Jamin, the ship's pilot. Hana held her breath. After 30 years in space, she thought she had seen everything the galaxy had to offer, but the sensor readings suggested that was about to change. There, Jamin said suddenly. On screen. The image appeared on the main viewer, and Hana's mouth fell open. Massive metal structures were moving through the asteroid field like predatory animals. They were huge, angular, and intimidating in a way that Vorthak's ships never were. No curves, no elegant lines, just raw, brutal efficiency. By the ancients, Yuna whispered. What are those things? Hana couldn't answer. She was staring at ships unlike anything in the galactic database. Ships that looked like they were built for war. Admiral Jiwan walked through the corridors of the UES Incheon, her boots making solid sounds on the metal deck plates. The ship felt good around her, solid and powerful. 20 years of service in the human exploration fleet had taught her to trust these feelings. When a ship felt right, everything else usually followed. She stepped onto the bridge and immediately noticed the tension in the air. Her crew was focused and alert, the way they always were when something interesting was happening. The bridge of the Incheon was nothing like the elegant, quiet spaces favored by other species. It was built for war, with thick armor plating visible between the control panels and emergency stations ready for immediate use. Report, Jiwan said as she settled into her command chair. Dong Yun, her tactical officer, turned from his station. Admiral, we've got contacts on the edge of the system. 12 ships moving in formation. They've been trying to scan us for the past hour. Jiwan raised an eyebrow. Trying to scan us? Yes, ma'am. Their sensors are quite sophisticated, but they seem to be having trouble getting clear readings. Suman thinks it's because our engines are interfering with their equipment. That made sense. Human ships were not built for stealth or elegance. They were built to survive anything the universe could throw at them, and that meant lots of thick armor, redundant systems, and engines that could power a small city. Other species often complained that human ships were too loud, too bright, and too crude. Humans called it being prepared. What do we know about them? Jiwan asked. They're definitely artificial, Dong Yun replied. But their technology is completely different from ours. They seem to use some kind of energy-dampening field instead of traditional armor. Very advanced, but also very fragile-looking. Jiwan nodded. She had read the reports from other first contact situations. Many alien species preferred to build light, fast ships that relied on avoiding damage rather than absorbing it. It was an interesting approach, but not one that humans had ever found practical. Suman looked up from her engineering station. Admiral, their scanning attempts are getting more intense. I don't think they understand how our ships work. Our fusion reactors are probably confusing their sensors. How so? Well, we're running at minimum power right now, but that's still more energy output than most species use for their entire fleets. Plus, our electromagnetic shielding creates interference patterns that they're probably not used to. Jiwan smiled. Humans had always been good at making lots of noise and light. It came from growing up on a world where the weather could kill you and the animals were always trying to eat you. When humans built something, they built it to last. Any attempt at communication from them? She asked. Kyung-ho, the communications officer, shook his head. Nothing we can understand. They're using some very exotic transmission methods. It's almost like they're trying to communicate without being detected. Stealth communications, Jiwon mused. Interesting. What's our fleet? Status? All ships ready and operational, Dong-hyun reported. The Busan, Gwangju, and Daegu are in escort formation. The destroyers are spread out for maximum sensor coverage. The carriers Ulsan and Pohang have their fighter squadrons on standby. Jiwon looked at the tactical display showing her fleet's position. 12 ships total, each one a masterpiece of human engineering. The dreadnoughts were nearly 2 kilometers long and armed with enough firepower to crack a planet. The destroyers were smaller but faster, designed to hunt down enemy vessels and destroy them with overwhelming force. The carriers held hundreds of fighter craft, each one capable of engaging multiple enemy ships. To humans, this was a standard exploration fleet. They had learned long ago that space was dangerous, and the best way to deal with danger was to carry a very big stick. But Jiwon suspected that to the aliens watching them, her fleet might look like an invasion force. Admiral, Sumin called out, I'm reading some interesting energy patterns from the alien ships. They're definitely advanced, but they seem to be built on completely different principles from ours. Explain. Their power systems are incredibly efficient, Sumin said, studying her displays. They're using maybe 1% of the energy we would need to move ships that size. But that also means they don't have much power available for weapons or defensive systems. Jiwon frowned. You mean they're not heavily armed? I don't think they're armed at all, Sumin replied. At least, not in any way we would recognize. Their ships seem to be designed for peaceful exploration. This was unexpected. Most of the alien species that humans had encountered were either traders or warriors. Peaceful explorers were rare and usually didn't survive long in the dangerous regions of space where humans operated. Recommendations? Jiwon asked her senior staff. We should make contact, Dong-hyun said immediately, but carefully. If they're peaceful, we don't want to scare them. If they're not, we want to know what we're dealing with. I agree, said Kyung-ho, but we should be aware that our standard communication protocols might seem aggressive to them. We broadcast with a lot of power. Jiwon considered this. Humans did everything with a lot of power. It was just their way. But she could see how that might be intimidating to a species that preferred subtlety. All right, she decided. Let's show them what we can do, but gently. Dong-hyun, have the Busan perform some basic maneuvers. Nothing aggressive, just standard fleet movement. I want to see how they react. Yes, ma'am. Jiwon watched the tactical display as the destroyer Busan moved away from the main formation. The ship's captain, Sang-hoon, was one of her best officers. He would know how to make the maneuvers look impressive without being threatening. Sumin, make sure all our systems are running clean, Jiwon ordered. I want them to get good sensor readings of our technology. Already on it, Admiral. All systems are operating at normal parameters. Normal parameters for a human ship, Jiwon thought with amusement. She wondered what the aliens would make of that. Human normal tended to be other species' maximum emergency power. Admiral, Kyung-ho said suddenly, I'm detecting some kind of feedback from their sensors. I think we might be overloading their equipment. Overloading how? Our engines produce a lot of electromagnetic interference, Kyung-ho explained. It's not a problem for our systems, because we're designed to work in that environment, but their sensors seem to be much more sensitive. Every time we do anything, it's like shining a spotlight in their eyes. Jiwon winced. That was not the impression she wanted to make during first contact. Can we reduce our interference? Not without shutting down major systems, Sumin replied. Our engines, weapons, life support, and communications all contribute to the effect. It's just how human technology works. So we're basically blinding them just by existing? Pretty much, yes. Jiwon sighed. This was going to be a challenge. Humans had encountered this problem before with other species, but never to this extent. Usually, aliens were tough enough to handle a little electromagnetic interference. Though. Right, she said finally. Let's try to make contact anyway. Kyung-ho, transmit a standard first contact package. Use minimum power and simple mathematical concepts. Let's see if we can get their attention without frying their electronics. Yes, ma'am? As Kyung-ho began working on the transmission, Ji-won found herself studying the alien ships on her display. They were beautiful in their own way, sleek and elegant like works of art. But they also looked fragile, like they would break if someone looked at them too hard. She hoped this first contact would go smoothly. Humans had a reputation for being a bit too enthusiastic in their approach to diplomacy. The last thing she wanted was to accidentally start a war because her ships were too loud. Minho stared at his sensor displays in growing horror as warning lights began flashing across his control panel. Every instrument he had was screaming alerts, and the readings made no sense at all. One of the alien ships had started moving, and the energy patterns it was creating were beyond anything he had ever imagined possible. "Commander," he called out, his voice tight with strain. "One of their ships is maneuvering. The energy output is. I can't even measure it properly." Hana rushed over to his station, looking over his shoulder at the chaotic displays. Lines of data were scrolling too fast to read, and several screens were showing error messages. "What's happening to your equipment?" "I don't know," Minho replied, frantically working his controls. "Every time that ship moves, it creates some kind of gravitational distortion. My sensors can't handle the interference." On the main viewing screen, they could all see the alien vessel performing what looked like a simple turn. It was a smooth, graceful movement that should have been completely normal. But to Vorthak's sensors, it was like watching a star explode in slow motion. "The gravitational forces alone should tear that ship apart," Yuna said from her engineering station. Her own displays were showing impossible readings. "No known material can withstand those kinds of stresses. Maybe their ships are stronger than they look," Hana suggested. "Commander," Minho interrupted, "I'm losing sensor contact with half the fleet. The interference is spreading." This was getting worse by the minute. Hana had never seen Vorthak technology fail so completely. Their sensors were designed to work in the most extreme conditions imaginable. They could track objects through stellar, radiation, gravitational anomalies, and electromagnetic storms. But somehow, these alien ships were producing interference that overwhelmed even their best equipment. "Taeho," she called to her communications officer. "Are you having problems too?" "Yes, Commander," Taeho replied, sweat beading on his forehead as he worked at his controls. "Every frequency is filled with static. It's like they're broadcasting on every channel at once." Wonho, the fleet's xenobiologist, looked up from his analysis station with a pale face. "Commander, I've been studying their movement patterns. These aliens, I think they're a warrior species." "What makes you say that?" Hana asked. "Look at how their ship is moving," Wonho explained. "Those aren't exploration maneuvers. Those are combat formations, evasion patterns, attack approaches, defensive positioning. Everything they're doing is designed for fighting." Hana felt a chill run through her body. The Vorthak Confederation had not encountered a truly hostile species in over 1,000 years. Their advanced technology and peaceful approach to diplomacy had always been enough to resolve conflicts before they started. But these aliens seemed to operate under completely different rules. "How many weapons are they carrying?" she asked. Wonho shook his head. "I can't tell. Their ships are so heavily armored that my scanners can't penetrate the hull. But Commander, the energy levels suggest they have enough firepower to destroy planets." "That's impossible," Yuna protested. "No species would build ships with that much destructive capability. The energy requirements alone would be enormous." "These ships have enormous energy," Minho pointed out. "Look at the readings. That one vessel is producing more power than our entire homeworld." Hana stared at the tactical display, trying to understand what they were facing. The alien ship had finished its maneuver and was now holding position, but the energy readings were still off the charts. Even at rest, it was consuming incredible amounts of power. "Commander," Yunji called out from her secondary sensor station, "I'm detecting weapon systems activating on several of their ships." "Weapon systems?" Hana's voice went up an octave. "Multiple launch tubes, energy weapons, and something that looks like missile defense systems," Yunji reported. "But Commander, these aren't just weapons. Some of these systems are more powerful than our planetary defense grids." Hana felt her knees go weak. Planetary defense grids were designed to protect entire worlds from asteroid impacts and hostile fleets. The idea that individual ships could carry that kind of firepower was terrifying. "Are they targeting us?" she asked. "I don't think so," Yunji replied, studying her screens carefully. "It looks like their weapons activated automatically when they detected our scanning attempts. They might be defensive systems." Defensive systems that powerful? Yuna shook her head in disbelief. What kind of enemies do these aliens fight that they need defenses like that? That was a question Hana did not want to think about. Any species that required such massive defensive capabilities must live in a very dangerous part of the galaxy. Or maybe they were the danger that other species needed to defend against. "Commander," Taiho said suddenly, "I'm receiving a transmission from them." "What kind of transmission?" "It's very simple. Basic mathematical sequences, prime numbers, that sort of thing. But Commander, the power level of this transmission. They're broadcasting with enough energy to reach the other side of the galaxy." Hana blinked. "The other side of the galaxy? Why would they need that much power for a simple message?" "Maybe they don't know how to communicate quietly," Taiho suggested. "Or maybe this is quiet for them." The thought that this overwhelming display of power might be the aliens trying to be subtle was almost too much for Hana to handle. If this was them being careful and peaceful, what would they be like if they were actually trying to be intimidating? "Commander," Minho called out urgently. "Something's happening. Multiple contacts are powering up simultaneously." The main viewing screen shifted to show the entire alien fleet. One by one, the massive ships were coming to life. Lights began appearing along their hulls, and energy readings spiked across the board. To human eyes, it would have looked like a normal fleet coming to alert status. To Vorthak's sensors, it was like watching a dozen suns being born at once. "All stations report equipment failure," Minho announced, his voice shaking. "We're completely blind." The bridge fell silent, except for the sound of warning alarms and the hum of overloaded circuits. Hana realized that they were now completely helpless in front of an alien force that seemed to view massive destruction as normal operating procedure. "Commander," Wanho said quietly, "I recommend we withdraw immediately. These aliens are beyond anything we can handle." "We can't withdraw," Hana replied grimly. "Our stealth systems aren't working. They can see us perfectly." "How is that possible?" "Their sensors are too primitive to be fooled by our technology," Yuna explained. "They use brute force methods that cut right through our stealth fields, so they were trapped. Visible to an alien force that carried enough firepower to glass entire star systems using technology that operated by rules the Vorthak couldn't understand." Hana had never felt so helpless in her entire career. "Open a channel," she ordered Taiho. "All frequencies. I want to talk to them." "Commander, are you sure that's wise?" "We don't have any choice," Hana replied. "We need to find out what they want before they decide we're a threat." As Taiho worked to establish communication, Hana found herself staring at the alien fleet and wondering if this would be the last patrol mission she ever flew. Sumin looked up from her engineering console aboard the UES Incheon with a confused expression. "Admiral, I'm getting some strange feedback from the alien ships. Their equipment seems to be malfunctioning." Admiral Jiwon frowned. "Malfunctioning? How?" "Well, every time we perform standard operations, their sensor arrays seem to overload," Sumin explained. "I've been monitoring their electromagnetic emissions, and they're definitely having technical difficulties." Dong-Yun turned from his tactical station. "Admiral, maybe we should power down some of our systems. We might be interfering with their technology accidentally." Jiwon considered this. The last thing she wanted was to damage alien equipment during first contact. That was not the kind of impression humanity wanted to make. "What systems can we safely shut down?" "Not many," Sumin replied. "Our life support, navigation, and communications all produce significant electromagnetic output. Even at minimum power, we're probably creating more interference than their entire fleet combined." This was a familiar problem. Human technology had always been robust and powerful, but it was also loud and messy. Other species often complained that human ships were like flying electromagnetic storms. Usually this wasn't a problem because most aliens were tough enough to handle a little interference. But these particular aliens seem to have very sensitive equipment. "Try reducing power to non-essential systems," Jiwon ordered. "But keep weapons and defenses online. We don't know their intentions yet. As Suman began making adjustments, Kyung-ho reported success with communications. Admiral, I've established contact. They're using basic mathematical concepts to communicate. Very sophisticated approach, actually. What are they saying? They're asking who we are and what we want, Kyung-ho replied. Standard first contact questions. But Admiral, there's something odd about their transmission methods. Odd how? They're using incredibly low power levels and very narrow frequency bands. It's like they're trying to whisper when we're used to people who shout. Ji-won nodded. This explained a lot. Humans communicated the same way they did everything else, with lots of power and no subtlety. These aliens apparently preferred a more delicate approach. Send them a standard peaceful contact message, she ordered, but use the lowest power setting possible. As Kyung-ho worked on the transmission, Ji-won studied the tactical display showing the alien fleet. 7 ships in a defensive formation, all of them elegant and graceful in a way that human ships had never been. They looked like works of art compared to the brutal functionality of her own vessels. Admiral, Suman called out, I'm getting more detailed readings on their technology now that they're closer. These ships are incredible. How so? Their energy efficiency is amazing, Suman explained. They're doing things with a fraction of the power that we would need. Their propulsion systems, life support, even their sensors. Everything is optimized for minimum energy use. Ji-won raised an eyebrow. That sounds like a weakness. In some ways, yes, Suman agreed. They don't have much power available for weapons or heavy defensive systems. But Admiral, their engineering is far more advanced than ours in many areas. They've solved problems that we're still working on. This was interesting. Ji-won had read reports about other alien species with advanced technology, but most of them had been focused on completely different areas than humans. These aliens seemed to have taken the opposite approach to space travel. Elegant efficiency instead of raw power. Any signs of hostility? She asked Dong-yeon. None that I can detect, her tactical officer replied. They're maintaining a defensive formation, but they haven't powered up any weapons. In fact, I'm not sure they have any weapons. No weapons at all. If they do, they're nothing like ours, Dong-yeon explained. I'm not seeing any missile tubes, energy weapon arrays, or projectile systems. Their ships seem to be designed for peaceful exploration. Ji-won found this hard to believe. In her experience, space was too dangerous for unarmed ships to survive for long. Pirates, hostile aliens, and natural disasters made weapons a necessity for any serious exploration effort. But maybe these aliens came from a more peaceful part of the galaxy. Admiral, Kyung-ho interrupted, I'm receiving a response to our message. They want to know why our ships are so, and I'm translating here, energetic. Energetic? I think they're asking why we use so much power for everything, Kyung-ho explained. They seem to be genuinely confused by our technology. Ji-won laughed. Tell them it's just how human engineering works. We like to build things that are strong and reliable. How should I explain that in mathematical terms? Good point, Ji-won said. Just tell them we come from a dangerous world and we're used to building equipment that can handle anything. As Kyung-ho worked on the translation, Ji-won thought about the differences between human and alien approaches to technology. Humans had developed their engineering philosophy on Earth, where storms, earthquakes, and predators made survival a constant challenge. They built things to last and to work under the worst possible conditions. These aliens had apparently never faced such challenges. Their elegant, efficient ships suggested a species that had developed in safety and comfort. It was an interesting contrast. Admiral, Suman said, I've been analyzing their ship designs, and I think I understand why they're having sensor problems. Explain. Their technology is designed to work in a very clean electromagnetic environment, Suman said. No interference, no background radiation, no competing signals. It's incredibly sensitive, but also incredibly fragile. And our ships are like walking interference generators, Ji-won concluded. Exactly. To them, we're probably like a rock concert, playing next to a library. This explained the aliens' apparent distress. They were trying to conduct delicate scientific observations while human ships blasted electromagnetic noise in all directions. No wonder their equipment was malfunctioning. Can we clean up our emissions? Ji-won asked. Not without completely Rebuilding our ships, Suman replied. The interference is built into our basic design philosophy. Heavy shielding, redundant systems, high power everything. It all contributes to the problem. Ji-won sighed. This was going to make diplomacy challenging. Keep working on it. Maybe we can find some kind of compromise. Admiral, Dong-yun said suddenly, I'm detecting movement from their fleet. They're backing away from us. Ji-won looked at the tactical display. The alien ships were indeed moving away, slowly and carefully. They weren't fleeing, but they were definitely trying to put distance between themselves and the human fleet. They're probably trying to get far enough away that their sensors can function properly, Sumin suggested. Or they're afraid of us, Dong-yun added grimly. Ji-won hoped it wasn't the second option. Humans had a reputation for being intimidating, but she had hoped to avoid that impression during first contact. Unfortunately, it seemed like human technology was naturally frightening to species that preferred subtlety and elegance. Admiral, Kyung-ho called out. I'm receiving another message from them. They're asking for permission to scan our ships from a safe distance. A safe distance? They want to study our technology without getting close enough to damage their equipment, Kyung-ho explained. Ji-won considered this. It was a reasonable request, and it showed that the aliens were still interested in peaceful contact despite their apparent fear of human technology. Grant permission, she decided, and ask them if they would be willing to share some of their technical data with us. We're as curious about them as they are about us. As the two fleets settled into a more comfortable distance from each other, Ji-won found herself hoping that this first contact would lead to something positive. The aliens seemed peaceful and intelligent, even if their technology was completely different from human engineering. Maybe they could learn something from each other. Admiral Ji-won stood in the main shuttle bay of the UES Incheon, watching as her crew made final preparations for the alien delegation's arrival. The bay had been cleared of all unnecessary equipment, and the lighting had been dimmed to what humans considered a comfortable level. She hoped it wouldn't be too bright for their visitors. Admiral, Dong-yun said as he approached, the alien shuttle is requesting permission to dock, but they want to know if we can reduce our electromagnetic output even further. Ji-won nodded. Suman, what's our current status? We've shut down everything except life support, minimal lighting, and basic communications, Suman replied from her portable console. We're running as quiet as we possibly can. And they're still having problems? Their shuttle's sensors are incredibly sensitive, Suman explained. Even our reduced output is causing interference, but they say they can manage it for a short time. This was going to be interesting. Ji-won had participated in several first contact situations during her career, but she had never encountered aliens whose technology was so incompatible with human engineering. It was like trying to perform surgery while someone set off fireworks nearby. Permission granted for docking, she told Dong-hyun. Make sure everyone knows to keep noise and activity to a minimum. A few minutes later, the alien shuttle appeared in the bay entrance. It was a beautiful craft, all smooth curves and elegant lines. It moved silently through the air, settling onto the deck with barely a whisper of sound. Ji-won couldn't help but compare it to human shuttles, which tended to be loud, angular, and built like flying tanks. The shuttle's door opened with a soft hiss, and 5 aliens stepped out. They were humanoid, but taller and thinner than humans, with pale skin and large eyes. They moved gracefully, like dancers, and their clothing seemed to be made of some kind of shimmering material that changed color as they walked. The leader of the group approached Ji-won and spoke in a melodious voice. Her translation device picked up the words a moment later. I am Commander Hana of the Vorthak Confederation. Thank you for allowing us aboard your vessel. Welcome aboard the UES Incheon, Ji-won replied. I am Admiral Ji-won of the Human Exploration Fleet. We're honored to meet you. Hana looked around the shuttle bay with obvious curiosity. Your ship is very solid, she said carefully. Ji-won smiled. We like to build things that last. Would you like a tour of our facilities? Yes, please. But if I may ask, why do you need such heavy construction? Your walls appear to be thick enough to withstand planetary bombardment. Because they are, Ji-won replied matter-of-factly. You never know what you might encounter in deep space. Hana's eyes widened. You expect to be bombarded? Not expect. Exactly, Ji-won said, as she led the group toward the corridor. "But we like to be prepared for anything. Space can be dangerous." As they walked through the ship, Ji-won noticed that the aliens seemed amazed by everything they saw. The thick bulkheads, the heavy blast doors, the emergency stations positioned every few meters, all of it was clearly foreign to their experience. "This is remarkable," said one of the aliens, who had introduced herself as Yuna. "Your entire ship is designed as a fortress." "All human ships are built this way," Ji-won explained. "We learned long ago that space doesn't forgive weakness." "But surely your home region is peaceful?" asked another alien, Won-ho. "You must have some ships, designed for pure exploration." Dong-yun, who was walking with them, laughed. "This is one of our exploration ships. You should see our actual warships." The aliens exchanged glances that Ji-won couldn't interpret. She was beginning to realize that humans and Vorthak had very different ideas about what constituted normal ship design. They stopped at the main engineering section, where Sumin was waiting to explain human technology. "These are our fusion reactors," she said, pointing to the massive assemblies behind thick, transparent barriers. "Each one produces enough power to supply a major city." "How many reactors does this ship have?" Hana asked. 12 primary reactors, plus 6 backup units," Sumin replied. "We like redundancy." 18 fusion reactors? Yuna sounded shocked. "For one ship?" "Our energy requirements are pretty high," Sumin admitted. "Weapons, shields, life support engines, everything needs lots of power." Minyo, who had been quiet until now, studied the reactor displays with fascination. "Your power management systems are incredible. But why do you need so much energy?" "Well," Sumin said, "our main weapons require about as much power as a small star produces, and our defensive shields need even more energy than that." The silence that followed this statement was profound. Ji-won realized that she might have just said something shocking. "Small star?" Hana finally asked. "Figure of speech," Ji-won said quickly. "But our weapons are quite powerful. We've found it's better to have too much firepower than too little." "How? Much firepower?" Won-ho asked quietly. Ji-won looked at Dong-yun, who shrugged. "Our main guns can crack a small moon," he said. "The missile systems can sterilize a planet's surface. Standard equipment for a ship this size." The aliens stared at him in what appeared to be horror. Ji-won began to suspect that Vorthak ships were not equipped with similar weapons. "Do you often need to crack moons?" Hana asked carefully. "Not often," Ji-won replied. "But asteroids can be dangerous, and sometimes you encounter hostile wildlife on planets. It's good to have options." "Hostile wildlife that requires moon-cracking weapons?" Yuna sounded faint. "You'd be surprised what's out there," Dong-yun said cheerfully. "We once ran into a space creature the size of a small planet. Had to use the big guns to convince it to leave us alone." Ji-won decided it was time to change the subject. "Would you like to see our communications center?" As they continued the tour, Ji-won noticed that the aliens were becoming increasingly quiet. They examined everything with the fascination of people, viewing museum exhibits, but there was also an element of fear in their behavior. When they reached the bridge, Hana asked the question that Ji-won had been expecting. "Are all human ships this heavily armed?" "More or less," Ji-won replied honestly. "This is actually one of our lighter exploration vessels. The real warships are much bigger." "How much bigger?" "About 10 times the size," Dong-yun said, "with proportionally more firepower." Hana sat down, heavily in one of the bridge chairs. "Commander Ji-won, may I ask what kind of enemies your people fight that require such massive weapons?" Ji-won thought about this carefully. "We don't really have enemies," she said. "Not anymore. But we come from a world where survival was always a struggle. Every predator was dangerous. Every storm could kill you. Every disease was potentially fatal. We learned to be prepared for anything. And when you went into space, you brought that philosophy with you," Won-ho said. "Exactly. Better to have too much and not need it than to need it and not have it." Minyo was studying the sensor displays with obvious confusion. "Your sensors are so direct," he said. "No subtlety at all." "They're designed to cut through interference and jamming," Sumin explained. "We use high-power active scanning because it's reliable, even if it blinds everything else in the area." "Well, yes," If something doesn't want to be scanned, we definitely want to know about it. The communication session continued for several hours, with both sides sharing technical information and cultural details. Gradually, Ji-won began to understand that the Vorthak came from a very different background than humans. Their civilization had developed in peace and safety, allowing them to focus on elegance and efficiency rather than survival and strength. As the meeting drew to a close, Hana made a request that surprised Ji-won. "Admiral, would it be possible for us to escort your fleet to our space? Our government needs to know about your people." "Of course," Ji-won replied. "We'd be honored to make formal contact with your civilization." "There is one concern," Hana said carefully. "Your ships will cause significant sensor interference throughout our space. Our traffic control systems may have difficulty functioning." Ji-won nodded. "We'll keep our emissions as low as possible. And maybe your people can help us develop quieter technology." "Perhaps," Hana said. "Though I suspect your engineering philosophy is too different from ours for easy solutions." As the Vorthak delegation prepared to return to their ship, Ji-won reflected on what she had learned. Humanity was about to make contact with a civilization that was both more advanced and more peaceful than anything they had encountered before. It would be interesting to see how both species adapted to each other. "Admiral," Dong-yun said quietly as they watched the alien shuttle depart, "I get the feeling we just changed their entire worldview." "Probably," Ji-won agreed. "Just like they changed ours. Sometimes that's what first contact is all about." The human fleet formed up to follow the Vorthak ships toward their space. Ji-won couldn't help but smile. This was going to be the beginning of a very interesting relationship.